Good evening. You're with the Urban Debate with us this evening on this festive weekend here. I'm Seher Zama. But we're continuing with the focus on the news and the news that impacts you the most, which is the COVID-19 vaccine and India's race to get an indigenous one well in time at the start of the next year. But it is phase 3 of the Covaxin, which is produced by Bharat Biotech, which is currently facing a crunch. This is an unexpected hiccup, and this crunch is primarily connected to a shortage of volunteers. There aren't enough people coming forward to volunteer for phase 3 of the trials. And this is being reported across the 3 big cities of Delhi, Mumbai, and Bengaluru. We must understand here that the bare minimum that is required is at least 1,000 volunteers. The ideal figure is about 1,500 to 2,000, but the bare minimum is 1,000. And it is that 1,000 figure as well that we are struggling with. Right now, let's get you more details of this crunch. There is a shortage in the national capital of 650 volunteers. In Bengaluru, only 500 volunteers have come forward to participate in these trials. And in Mumbai, facing a shortfall of 481 volunteers. The concerns that we are raising tonight here on how this impacts the ongoing trials. Does this further delay the deadline that has been put forth here? And does this also eventually delay the fact of getting an indigenous, well-working, well-affordable vaccine for all across the country? Let's throw this open here to our panelists. Let's go straight across here to our guests we have tonight. We have Dr. Shashank Joshi, who's the Dean of the Indian College of Physicians at the Lilavati Hospital here. He's also a member of the COVID-19 task force in Maharashtra. We also have Dr. Anand Ban, who's the researcher with the Global Health Biotechs and Health Policy. There's Dr. Mohammad Shamim, professor of the Department of Tuberculosis and Respiratory Diseases of the Jain Medical College of the AMU, the Aligarh Muslim University, and also the principal investigator for this trial. And we have Ms. Charu Pragya, who's the spokesperson of the BJP here with us. First to you, Dr. Shashank Joshi, on your understanding of what this means. If there is a crunch in even getting volunteers, to what extent this pushes ahead the deadline that we've been hearing from the government in expecting to get an indigenous vaccine ready by early next year?
It is a little bit of a concern, but I am not alarmed by it. I think we need to do more community awareness and get more people to come and participate in the phase 3 clinical trial program. I think the phase 1 and phase 2 have happened in record pace. In COVID, we are breaking all records. This is the fastest trial on planet Earth. And obviously, there has been a little bit of lack of community sensitization in the local language. I think we need to recruit volunteers in the most ethical and appropriate way. And we need to sensitize them to the various effects and side effects. Okay. Unfortunately, the side effects have got blown out of proportion. The commonest side effect of an inactivated vaccine like the Bharat Biotech vaccine appears to be very safe in the theory part of it. And obviously, the most common side effects being injections or allergic reactions. But naturally, because nowadays news, particularly on social media and WhatsApp universities, spread so fast that this has been a little bit of a hurdle. I'm certain that we will be able to recruit patients in the next week, or volunteers as they would call it, in an appropriate way after sensitizing them into the clinical trial. I do agree that there might be a mini hiccup, but I think this will be overcome next week.
All right. That is, of course, being very optimistic about these developments, and agreed we have to move ahead positively here on this. Dr. Bhan, in your understanding, if we haven't seen these hiccups at the start of the trials in phase 1 and phase 2, when not many things were known about how this vaccine would act and react in your system, on whom it's been administered, the volunteers here, how are we facing this hiccup in phase 3 when the vaccine has largely established itself on certain parameters in phase 1 and phase 2 already?
Sure. Thank you, Seher. For those of us who have run clinical trials, one of the most important issues that you face as an investigator is how to recruit enough participants. And secondly, how do you retain them in trials? So recruitment and retention is a major activity for any clinical trial. And you have to plan in such a way that you have enough flow of participants coming through. And if you don't, there is a challenge. As Dr. Joshi is saying, this might be a temporary dip, but it is certainly something to look at. Now, there might be a few factors here. One is obviously phase 1 and phase 2 studies are typically much smaller, so it's easier to recruit that number of participants. As we're now getting into larger studies, which require higher number of participants, the numbers which you were already highlighting, it does get a bit more challenging because these are again, volunteers who are not infected, and you have to get enough who fulfill the inclusion criteria and get them to agree to participate for a 2-dose study. Now, there might be various factors why people are not interested. They might have this feeling that there is a vaccine already coming, so why should I sign up for something where there's a 50% chance of getting a placebo? It might also be the fact that there might be misinformation about the vaccine and vaccine candidates. Or 3, there might be generally there might be a better need for a better strategy to reach out to communities and make them understand why studies are done and then ethically recruit them. Probably there is a need to focus on all 3 of these issues and try to find out what the underlying factors might be. It's obviously in our interest if we are able to do studies fast in a proper way, because then we will get data. If this trial were to get prolonged, then one of the issues we would also face is if you have a vaccine which has already been introduced, let's say the serum one, then it becomes a bit difficult to run placebo-controlled trials, because then you might have a vaccine which is already there in the program, and then you might have to ethically think of a trial design where you are comparing the Bharat vaccine against the serum one, which will require much higher number of clinical trial participants. So from an ethics perspective, it does get a bit more complicated the more delayed things are. So hopefully this is something that the investigators are looking at.
Okay. Dr. Shamim, in your response here, in what's causing this, because 1,000 volunteers is the bare minimum, and we haven't been able to reach that either in phase 3. Ideally, there should be about 1,500 to 2,000 volunteers, but we haven't been able to reach the bare minimum of even 1,000 for phase 3, which is the last and final and the most crucial trial phase here.
I agree with Dr. Shashank Joshi that these are initial hiccups and that will be resolved soon. And hopefully this is just a matter of time that all of the side will be able to recruit 1,000 subjects. With regards to Aligarh Muslim University, we have already recruited 1,000 subjects. We were the first to recruit 1,000 subjects. The experience here in Aligarh was that initially we do have some problems here with the volunteers. The work of the field worker was very important. They went to the primary healthcare, tertiary healthcare, CSCs, PSCs, nearby villages, and so that they can sensitize the persons about this vaccine trial. They initially address their concern. They initiate talk with the principal investigator, the sub investigator, and so slowly we were able to recruit the volunteers. Initially, the day 1, day 2, we have only 20, or second day we have 12 volunteers. But when they came to us, they talked to us. We filled the ICF forms, informed consent form in regional languages in Hindi. They were satisfied. The volunteers were satisfied, and when they went back to their local area, their villages, there was mouth-to-mouth convincing of this trial. So we have, in Aligarh, we have to refuse the volunteer because the target was 1,000. We have at one point of time, we have 2,000 volunteers, but we have to refuse. No, this is the limiter. Now we have to refuse. Then if another trial will be there, then we will call you. So in Aligarh, it was very smooth running. And now we have started the booster dose, second dose also.
All right. So
last 5 days, we are giving the second dose also, and we are getting 99%.
Right, so perhaps we could call this the AMU model in how you have gone ahead with this process in allaying fears, in hand-holding of the volunteers to step forward, to sign up the document, and to really trust the system to go ahead with the trials here. Let me take that point across here to the BJP spokesperson, Ms. Charu Pragya. In your view, given that this has now been reported in the past few days here, What are we expecting next from the government? Or a change in strategy, or perhaps a wider communication here to assure volunteers that this is important. It's not that we're waiting for others to come forward or waiting for other brands or other vaccines to be bought from abroad. It is also largely the government's focus here to have an affordable indigenous vaccine ready well in time.
Sir, first of all, let me begin by complimenting you on picking up this issue to discuss today, because the more communication there is, the better people will understand. Am I audible, sir?
Yes.
Okay, my apologies. I thought I wasn't.
Yes, please.
So what I'm trying to say is communication is of great importance, and normal people who could be a part of this trial need to understand that there is no harm in contributing to something which is going to go a long way in saving people in your country. And a channel picking up a topic like this for discussion is important. It's great, and I wish more and more people would discuss this. The government needs to discuss this at length, as well as hospitals and volunteers, because I think what has happened is in the beginning people rushed to get vaccinated thinking that the vaccine is a given, it's not a trial, and once you take the shot you are very, very safe from COVID-19. But in the past couple of weeks, we have seen a turnaround. One, they have understood that a trial is not a vaccination. They have also understood that here is a disease which we are not able to study as well as the others because of the new strain which has just been discovered in UK. Also, there is a negative sentiment attached to any kind of vaccination, because the UK strain seems to be putting a lot of strain, if I can say that, on people. But these are all temporary hurdles, temporary hitches, and people will line up, because as you rightly said, an indigenous vaccine is the best one that we can hope for, because when trials are conducted on Indians, when trials are conducted on people of our indigenous I don't know what to call it in a clinical way. There are so many doctors on the panel, but I have heard discuss things like if a white person has undergone a trial, it might work the same on someone from the African continent, for example, or the Asian continent. So we need to appeal to people to help the government with this, to keep communication lines open. The doctors are doing their best, working around the clock, and this is your part to play a role. Also, I think the rising number of COVID turns off people from being a part of the clinical trials.
Also, perhaps the government also keeping the communication lines open on encouraging volunteers here. Dr. Bhan, would you call this an apprehension or a confidence building measure that is required right now? Because as we speak, there are about 14 to 15 countries, and this includes the developed nations, this includes the poor developing nations here as well, who have already started with their mass inoculation, be it with Pfizer, be it with Sputnik, be it with Moderna as well. While we're watching that happening across the world, we're sitting here and waiting for an indigenous vaccine to work for us, and because it will be essentially affordable, because we haven't seen the government moving ahead with either Pfizer or Sputnik for various reasons here. Would you call this a confidence building measure that is required right now, or would you call this just about an issue of communication, of getting the right word out to invite more volunteers on this?
Yeah, this is an area I've done a lot of work in terms of trying to understand recruitment and trying to understand, engaging communities. There is a science to it. We have to remember that participating in a clinical trial of this scale is an altruistic act. It's not, you cannot push into some kind of a moral duty. You have to appeal to people, but you also have to be fair to them in terms of explaining to them what they are signing up for. So in that sense, yes, absolutely. More communication, more information, ensuring people don't have any misapprehensions is important. But I think what is equally important is to make people understand that if you were to sign up and if something were to happen, that the investigator team, as well as the sponsors, in this case it's also the ICMR, which is a government body, would take care of you. So I think people might sometimes have apprehensions about adverse events, about something going wrong. But it's best practice that if there is something which happens, then those participants would be taken care of. Also, an assurance that those who might be in the placebo arm, if this vaccine were to be shown, to be proven effective, that they would get access to the vaccine. But also it's important to reinforce that, we don't give any false hope to participants, because at the end of the day, it's a clinical trial, and it's a clinical trial to show efficacy and also long-term safety, etc.
That's right.
So I don't think we can misinform participants. They have a right to know that it's experimental in nature. We are all hopeful and optimistic about it, but I think we have to be fair to participants. And I think if you're more open and transparent and promise them that you'll take care of them, there is a high likelihood many people will come forward.
Okay, Dr. Joshi, what do you think needs to change as far as government strategy here on this is concerned? Because this is phase 3, because it's so crucial, because it records the efficacy of a vaccine here, this becomes all the more important to get the right word out. And I'm asking you, for someone who's part of the COVID-19 task force in Maharashtra, and 2 major BMC hospitals in Mumbai have recorded this volunteer crunch.
I think, first of all, I have to congratulate you for taking up this topic. I think I would agree with Madam there. And I think we need to do this at a local level, side by side. As you saw that in UP, Professor Saab has very nicely recruited. He had surplus of volunteers. So I think it is a local issue. We need to sensitize them in the right way, in the most appropriate ethical way, so that we are able to recruit them better. So I think that's all which needs to be done. I think it was a local hiccup. And probably the 3 major metros have faced it coincidentally. I don't think there is any link with the new strain. There could have been a little fear or a phobia, but I don't think it is strain independent. And I think the vaccine will work even with the new strain. In fact, right now, as UK is getting vaccine, already people are in the new strain. So I think
Dr. Shamim, going by your experience here, would you call this a local hiccup, or what? Or what many have been also widely talking about is the factor that a state government's health minister who took the first shot here in the intervening period before taking the second shot already had contracted COVID-19. Do you think that has worked as a major fear factor regarding this?
No, actually the minister that had COVID, it had nothing to do with the COVID vaccine, because the vaccine efficacy was to be tested 42 days after the first shot. And he developed the COVID within 15 days. So it is nothing to do with the vaccine.
Absolutely.
Secondly, one thing that I want to add, that there are a large number of queries regarding if I get the placebo arm of the vaccine IP investigational product, then what will be my fate? What will happen after the vaccine will come in the market? So my request, my advice to the government is that these volunteers who are getting the placebo, they should be among the frontliners. So whenever the vaccine come in the market, they should be vaccinated first along with the healthcare workers. So that will develop more of the confidence among the volunteers who are doubting about what will be the fate of the placebo arm of the vaccine.
All right, fair enough. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it at that. But this is a big takeaway here, because at the end of the day, this is something that needs to be far more largely communicated. If India's first indigenous vaccine here, the Covaxin being produced by the Bharat Biotech, is facing this hiccup, primarily because the government has continued to maintain that we're hoping to get in a vaccine at the early stage of early next year. This is the vaccine that we've all been pinning our hopes upon, and this is why trials need to conclude in reporting a positive efficacy here as well. And that is the word that the government needs to send out on why having volunteers step out for this in large numbers is important. Thanks for being with us here tonight.